Coogs house. Houston knocked off Baylor 31-24 in a rivalry game to finish 9-3 in a very successful Willie Fritz second season.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth, and whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to stop by, thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day, making Locked On Podcast Network the number one sports podcast network in the world. If you're interested in the conversation and you don't know what to say, tell us how many it's a cold time in Texas right now. Tell us how many layers you got on these days. Today's show is brought to you by our buddies over at Game Time. If you're trying to get in and watch the Houston Cougars or any other team in Houston or anything else that's going on in Houston, check out Game Time and the best prices on tickets. More on that fun later. But I want to talk about Houston beating Baylor one more time. I want to give you some more water cooler fodder of sorts for that one, right? And then I also Houston's successful season they just wrapped up in a regular season kind of fashion, 9-3, fourth in the Big 12. What does that mean, and what's next in terms of success? And as I talk about what's next, I do want to talk about bowls and what that means and what bowls you could be looking at and why I do and don't think certain things are going to happen. But first, foremost, Houston beat Baylor before any and all of that happened. And look, this I think was most impressive to me as a game that Houston bluntly has lost plenty of times in the past. They had a big lead, watch it slip away. It got tied up late. Houston's found ways to lose that game under, let's say, the previous administration, previous cultures. It just hadn't always gone Houston's way, and Houston is able to find ways to muster that one out. In no small part, this was because of Connor Wigman controlling the ground game. But truthfully, once the game got tied up, he fell back into finding his future NFL-bound wide receiver. I guess Amare Thomas has not announced anything, a lot of hubbub about what he's going to do next. But Amare Thomas has every reason to look at the NFL draft, and I imagine that's a very high priority of his. Again, that's where the biggest dollars are, even with NIL deals and stuff like that. I mean, that's the biggest dollar amount that guy's going to find. He did just finish his third, or I guess he has a bowl game left to go. I'd imagine Amare's looking at pro stuff, and he looked every bit of a pro on the field in that final offensive drive of substance, I should say. They did have a drive where they like waste the clock out or whatever. But he had 4 of his 9 catches in that one, and was just really, really impactful. He had 97 yards of the day and a touchdown. But I feel like on that last drive was like winning time, so to speak, right? Like winning time. Houston able to find Amare Thomas. Now, I also feel like it was interesting that Houston felt in control of this game. They did control the game on the ground, had 216 yards rushing at 4.5 yards a pop. That's pretty strong considering, look, I love Mackay, but Mackay Muse had a negative 8-yard rush there as well. On an end-around kind of deal. Orb motion is not so great for Houston. But I think what's interesting is that Houston thought they controlled this game. I think you can see that when a, normally conservative, run the football, waste the clock kind of offense out of Houston went for it on 4th down 5 times. Now, they did get 4 of them, and to be fair, the special teams have had their own struggles in the last month of the season, and so maybe that was some of it. But honestly, that's a sign of a very confident team in control of a ball game. Look, I'm probably more of a risky offensive play caller and go for it kind of guy than the Houston Cougars are. I also have not coached a game with nearly as high stakes, so that's probably a big part of it too. But I was surprised to see them go for it again and again. And if anything, there was almost one time I thought they should have gone for it. They ended up backing up for a punt inside, borderline field goal range. You put field goal, do you go for whatever? So I almost thought they should have gone for a 6th time. And it was interesting to see how they really did operate like that. Houston's only called for 2 penalties in this game. 2 penalties that counted, I guess I should point out. Like if they have offsetting or reads at the down or whatever, I guess they don't count. But that indicates a strong level of control. Houston had the ball for 36.5 minutes of this game. It just really dominated a lot of ways that almost comeback of Baylor's that made the score feel super close kind of negated. Houston really controlled, had a couple turnovers forced on defense, really controlled this game, um, and kind of left Baylor dizzy and unsure what happened. Now, obviously, I watched the game again on Sunday, and I try and take notes on what I missed the first time around, and I know what happens or whatever. And I had a couple second watch standouts that I want to make sure we give shout outs to in this one. Defensively, Sione Fotu. I talked about guys up front. I talked about Latrell McCutcheon. Um, Fotu, I thought, had a really, really impressive game. I guess he's only credited with 4 tackles. I double checked that twice after watching a second time. I feel like there's a lot more places than that. He did have a hurry and had some other pressures, the fumble recovery. I just really felt like in watching that one, he was really all over the field in the run game, and kind of when Baylor found a way to get him blocked up was kind of when they started their comeback, really. Now, I would also point out there were moments in the early going where Baylor had a couple of long runs to start the game, but really, Fotu stuck out to me as like, oh, I didn't talk about that guy in the post game reaction, the 12 minutes where that was. I don't know if I mentioned his name enough given how well I thought he played. Honestly, another guy that was high on my list for that second watch standout on defense was Jordan Allen. The Jordan Allen played a really great game except for one play. The deal is that one play was pretty not great. Look, he played a really great game except for the sluggo that got him over the top. That was the game tying touchdown. And so, I wonder if on the whole, like, I think they were picking on him a little bit. They went to him right before that. And anyway, he had a really good game too. I think Fotu got the edge to me because that one was very direct, like his cover kind of deal. There wasn't safety at the top help. There probably should have been, but also Jordan, I kind of left this. Offensively, we talked about Connor Wigman getting 126 yards on the ground, the most on the ground for him in college. He had a touchdown on the ground. He had 2 in the air. Sorry, 2 on the ground, 1 in the air. Had that backwards. He also, for what it's worth, 200 yards passing, 121 yards rushing, over 3 yards of offense at a one player's big. We talked about that before. Amare Thomas, I talked about the start of this. Amare Thomas had a pros pro kind of game, looked every bit the part. Dean Connors got in the end zone. DJ Butler ran hard. One guy I don't think I talked about enough in the postgame, the second watch standout on offense, is Tanner Koziol. Now, he could very well be about to win tight end of the year kind of awards. He's going to be a tight end of the Big 12. He and Trigg who are going to be competing for that. Raymond Trigg was not suited up for Baylor on Saturday, but is a really good tight end. Koziol had 7 catches for 59 yards. What I did not put together until rewatching it, until I rewatch, is 50 of those 59 yards are after the catch. He is doing the work on all those. I also didn't really put together until watching it, like when you watch where they're running the football, those off tackle things, the quarterback run game. Koziol has gotten so much better at that kind of stuff. They were kind of finding him. What's funny about that is like the read on Koziol coming into Houston was that he was really just gigantic receiver that was being called a tight end because he was gigantic. And blocking was not necessarily his favorite thing to do. It's maybe, depending on who you listen to, one of the reasons he came to Houston instead of staying at Wisconsin or whatever, right? Like that was a big deal. And I would argue he's as good a blocking tight end as the Big 12 has. After watching him again a second time on Sunday from Saturday's game, he really lays a couple of important ones, including on Wegman's touchdown run. And I think that on the whole, right, we're talking about future NFL players, Amare Thomas and guys like that. Like Koziol's got the frame, Koziol's got the hands, but that he's able to grow that much as a blocker in one season at Houston, I think will translate to people saying, okay, I can work with that, right? I can take that and mold that into what I want. Another pro, right? Another pro. And other guys probably deserve their flowers and all that as well. I did mention Dean Connors briefly. I mentioned Kentrell Webb here. I mentioned Will James there. I think Rook Brown had a pretty fun game. Rook Brown has a lot of fun games this season. He got hit in the face with the football once and didn't catch it and kind of chuckle about it afterwards. Like, he's just a fun guy to root for. Now, Houston wins this game. Again, like I mentioned, they have lost this game in the past. And they finish at 9 wins. And I think that's a remarkably successful season for Houston and heading to a fun bowl game. We'll get to that in the third segment. But in the second segment, I'll talk about exactly how successful that game or that season we just had was. Before we get too far, I would remind you that today's show is brought to you by our buddies over at Game Time. Because if you're trying to get to that bowl game with Houston, we'll never find out where that is. The best place to get tickets is going to be Game Time. If you're trying to get to the World Cup, which is coming back to North America for the first time since 1994, 48 teams, the first time ever, this massive thing. Let's be honest, getting tickets to the game is often going to be the hardest part of those trips. And that's why Game Time app is so clutch. Finally giving fans a real advantage when it comes to snagging seats. Game Time, track price drops in real time, get alerts on great seat options, buy tickets the moment they hit the app, puts the power back into your hands, makes going to the World Cup realistic instead of impossible. Now, so simple to scroll through different matchups, compare seat views on which tickets are where, and see exactly what you should be looking at. Prices are all the fees up front. You have no last second surprises at checkout. You know what you're going to pay. You know what your budget is, and they can help you find exactly what you're looking for. You can take the guesswork out of buying World Cup tickets, college football bowl game tickets, any tickets you're looking for in and around the H or otherwise at every match, concert, or event with Game Time. Down the Game Time app, create an account, use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Turn to play against. Download the app, make an account, use code Locked On College for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time. Park Rangers Locked On Coogs here, and Houston just finished the second season under Willie Fritz, and they went 9-3, got fourth place in the Big 12. Now, yes, they are technically tied for fourth, but the other two teams, Arizona and Arizona State, they have wins over. So they actually win those tiebreakers outright and are fully fourth in the Big 12 conference. Yes, it was a friendly schedule. And yes, you probably lost, I'd say 2. Some people might say 1 game you weren't supposed to. You also probably won 1 or 2 games that at least Las Vegas would have told you, quote, weren't supposed to. And so the 9-win number kind of feels almost like it evens out, because if you lost the games you weren't supposed to win in Las Vegas, you'd be down closer to 7. But if you'd won those games that you were probably supposed to win, being West Virginia and TCU, you'd be up at like 11 and potentially playing for the Big 12 title game based on tiebreaker with BYU, right? And so ultimately, that would have the middling of that, finding the middle of that at 9 actually feels kind of right. And this is a team that didn't just hit 9 wins, they went undefeated on the road along the way, undefeated and white, so to speak, this season. And that's a true testament to like the locking in, zeroing in focus of the program and culture, right? If you look at this program, look at what they did. It's hard to say anything outside of the fact that they were hyper focused on the task at hand at all times. Now, this team was also, conversely, I think the interesting thing about talking about how successful this team was is they were 3-3 at home. And honestly, 3 of those home losses were 3 of the 4 conference games at home. Like, what does it say about the program right there? Right. And that balance has been interesting. Like, yes, I think that Texas Tech's really good. I think Houston could have played better against Texas Tech. I also think Wigman getting knocked out. Houston got blitzed. It was the first big game of the season. All those things happened. But you also lost to West Virginia at home. You should have won that game. Yeah, look, you just should have won that game. You played bad. You should have beat TCU at home. You probably should have gone for the win. Even if you tied it up at the end, you probably shouldn't even gotten to that point, honestly. Right. And so you look at where the program sits after this. I think it's interesting I think this season at 9-3 is inarguably a success. I think there are plenty of people in the comment section that can tell me I'm a big stupid idiot and that wasn't a success. And I don't think there's a necessarily definitively right answer to this. I think 3-3 at home is bad. I frankly think that the two of the three home games you lost this season were inexplainable. I think undefeated on the road is unreal. I think some of those games you won on the road were special. I think that back and forth is very fair. And I think that as you look at the season coming in fourth in the Big 12, yes, schedule was handed to you. It is what, et cetera. I think that's a pretty strong resume. I also think for its worth that it is, frankly, as we talked in the offseason, I believe I told Spencer I thought it would be 9-3. Now, and now Spencer McLaughlin hosts Locked On College Football. When we talked to him, I looked at the schedule. We talked about the schedule, and he was like, I think Houston can go above 500. I was like, Spencer, I think we're going to go 9-3. I had Arizona State as a loss. I also thought they'd split these last couple games against TCU and Baylor because of the rivalry aspect. They ended up actually splitting the last two, but that was back when I thought that TCU and Baylor might actually be good. So, what do I know? But I look, man, I think that it's okay for people to say, like, I can't believe this team only won those 9 games. I also think, though, that the people that say, oh my God, this team won 9 games, look at what they're building, are right when they say that. And there's a lot of harping on who 2 of those 3 losses were. And look, I'm not saying that those were excusable. I've said inexcusable a couple of times. They should have beaten West Virginia. West Virginia is bad. They should have beat TCU. TCU's down. And they didn't do either one of those things. Frankly, they might have saved Sonny Dykes' job by losing TCU. And maybe big picture as a win for Houston, much like losing to Baylor in 2024 was, because then they kept Dave Aranda for what feels like forever at Baylor. And Houston's going to take advantage of that, I'm sure. Right. But like, hard to see that in the moment. I will say, and I am putting feelers out for some more confirmation on this. I do think the 3-3 and home thing speaks to the crowd number we talk about at times at Houston, right? Like, you talk about waiting to show up till you get ranked, and then you finally get ranked after beating Arizona State, and it's a big deal, and you show up to a mostly empty stadium. Now, was it the day after Halloween, 11 a.m., West Virginia? Sure, but that's deflating. Frankly, not unlike finally getting back into the rankings, going against TCU, last home game of your senior night, and look up and it's good crowd, but it still could have had more seats filled. And look, I get that I'm the out of towner, born there, spent a lot of time there, lived there for a long time, but don't live there anymore. I get that I'm the guy telling people to go to the games, but I do think that crowd at home plays a role there. When you say that this team was 9-3, but all 3 losses were at home, it's hard to see it at anything else. I think the other thing interesting about this is when you look at Houston going 9-3 this year, and you project upward progression, and you go from 4-8 last year with Fritz to 9-3 this year, and that is awesome. But the natural question is, what does that mean for next year? Because this program has hit this level of play, high level of play, I'd argue. Yep, a gigantic recruiting class coming in. And expectations have bluntly been raised. You're losing a lot of talent. I imagine you're losing Koziol, Amare, Thomas, the pros, a lot of seniors on senior day, right? Who knows the transfer portal brings? I will say I'm less worried about the current transfer portal issues with Houston than I used to be. Not from an NIL dollars perspective. There are still obviously the blue bloods going to blue blood that, but Houston's looking like a better program to be at than it was 2 years ago, right? I do think, though, that you got to look at what natural progression comes next for this program, kind of with some grains of salt. The great recruiting class you're bringing in this year is also going to be a bunch of freshmen. And that's okay. They're freshmen allowed to be freshmen, but how much of an impact does that make, right? Like, where does that take? Like, does Keyshawn Henderson start right away? Or does he kind of have series where he gets to do certain packagey kind of things with Connor Wigman next to him? Does he steal the job from him by midseason? Does that change what you're doing as a program when you go from starting a veteran Connor to fully Keyshawn? Or does Keyshawn take the red shirt and Houston try to win 11 games? Like, what the imbalance there will be at quarterback. And that's only one position, very important position, only one position we're speaking on there, right? I also don't necessarily think it's fair to say, well, this team has to improve, and then that means that 10 wins is the floor next season, right? Yes, I I do think they should be looking to be in the top quarter or third of the conference again, if not better. I think that's kind of where I'm looking at it. But the Big 12 conference will always be hard to gauge. It's a very competitive, topsy-turvy kind of conference. I think this team should look to be ranked a lot more throughout the year next year. Preseason ranking would be great, depending on what the transfer portal brings. Obviously, that has a lot more say in that than anything. 12 of the 25 from the preseason rankings in 2025 did not make the end of regular season top 25 rankings. Like, I don't know, preseason rankings, they know be all, but I do think like Houston should aim to be ranked a lot of the season next season. I also think as much as we talk about this year's friendly schedule, next year's schedule looks pretty friendly too. You open with Oregon State at home, Georgia Southern, and Southern. That should be 3-0. You're at Colorado, host Baylor, host Oklahoma State. That's a rebuilding program at Oklahoma State, a program that should be rebuilding in Baylor, and a Colorado program that seems to be spiraling. That should be 6-0. You host Cincy, was good this year. You host Central Florida. You host Kansas State. Kansas State, something weird's going on there, but you broke them a year ago. UCF you just beat at their place and not your best game. Cincinnati's good this year, but how good? Can you call that 8-1 all of a sudden? Say you drop one of those? Yes, your other games you have at West Virginia. I think you win, but Rich Rod's building something. That at West Virginia, I think you win. At Tech and at Utah. Look, suddenly, if you win one game, you're air quotes not supposed to, like you did this year, and you can cut out the games that you lose games you're supposed to win. You're talking about a team that is 10 wins. You're talking about a team that is 11 wins. Like, I don't know that it happens like that. I don't know how firm the expectation has to be, and I don't know the next year's a failure if you don't hit double digits or anything like that. I do think this team is set up to have a strong year next year. I do think this team is set up to be successful. And I would say between the success they had with last year's transport, I mean, look at the guys making plays on the team right now and look at when they got to campus. The talent evaluation out of the staff has been strong. I think it's fair to say that they'll be doing the same thing this transfer portal. Signing day is coming up soon. I'm telling you right now, there's going to be flips Houston's way. I'm hearing about them as you're hearing about them. Things are working. Things are moving. I think things are going to be good. Look at that schedule. Look at what's coming. I think it's up. I think things go up. Speaking of what's coming next, though, what's coming next for Houston is a trip to a bowl game. Which bowl game? Well, that's kind of a question mark. We're going to try and figure out what that question mark is in just 1 second. But first, today's show is brought to you by Omaha Steaks because the holidays are here. Always a little bit easier when you already know what the perfect gift is, and that's steak. Omaha Steaks almost makes it too simple. Whether you're treating yourself this season or sending something memorable to a family member or friends, Omaha Steaks delivers handcrafted perfection right to their door. This is the best time to jump in because the cyber sale is here and the deals are huge. Now, the quality is exactly what you hope for. Incredibly juicy, tender steaks, rich flavor, meals that make hosting or the weeknight cookout that much easier. And honestly, it's kind of gift that can bring people together. You don't need to guess anyone's size or what style they like. Steak is steak is steak, right? Save big on unforgettable gifts with Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com for 50% off site-wide, extra 20% off select flavors and favorites during their cyber sale. For an additional $35 off, use promo code COLLEGE at checkout. That's omahasteaks.com, promo code COLLEGE. Terms apply. See the site for details. Parker Angels locked on Coogs here. And look, the question around the weekend, I think, for a lot of Houston Cougar fans has been, okay, we're going bowling. We're 9-3. Where are we going? And like, honestly, I think people are really disappointed that the better you are, the less obvious that question is, right? The answer to that question, I should say. We won't fully know the answer to that question until after the Big 12 title game. And frankly, after the College Football Playoff Committee actually makes their selections. Now, I say the Big 12 title game because if BYU wins that title game, they'll likely leap into, obviously, the race of the Big 12, the College Football Playoff. I don't think Texas Tech would drop out of it, so you'd have two Big 12 teams in the College Football Playoff. If BYU loses that game, it gets a little more dicey on if the Big 12 gets a second team in or not. For what it's worth, I think they should be in. I think BYU has the same resume as Texas A&M, and people are just looking at the conference as far as whether they want to look at it. But BYU's resume is maybe more impressive than Texas A&M, if we're being really honest. Neither here nor there. I think, though, that you're going to see kind of some more, the trickle-down effect of that after the College Football Playoff Committee makes their decisions. Those decisions will get made after the Big 12 title game. Okay. Now, if only one Big 12 team gets in, I think you're looking at maybe the Pop-Tarts Bowl, but probably the Texas Bowl. Both have definite Big 12 ties. I would see a likely SEC tie-in if you got the Texas Bowl. But you could also see like the high-end group of 5 teams that we're seeing right now get in. The SEC team in there because of how many SEC teams get to make the playoff. Don't get me started. That would be a squad show topic. Don't get me started. But you probably play a middling SEC team in that. You have a pretty good shot, I would think. You could get a bad Missouri team, Tennessee. Both have beaten a lot of not great teams. You could also, get a great shot at LSU, who's just gone through their whole Lane Kiffin thing, right? I think it'd be actually great for storylines to get LSU. They're a little down. Guys be sitting out that game. But you'd ultimately kind of both be building up towards the 2027 non-conference matchup, right? You kind of like set the stage now, have some fun with it, and then in 2027, you're like, okay, this is the next step of whatever the programs were back then. Look where we've grown. Like that, I think is actually really fun storyline to build there, and see how the LSU thing travels that way. A lot of people want Houston get to play Texas at the Texas Bowl, and I don't think there's any shot that happens. Not because Houston can't make the Texas Bowl, but because I think everyone in Austin is fighting against the idea of Texas playing in the Texas Bowl. I don't think it's a Houston thing necessarily. The Texas Bowl is an SEC team versus a Big 12 team. And I think Austin is throwing all of their dollars. The SEC is throwing all of their weight into making sure Texas and Oklahoma, honestly, don't play a Big 12 team in a bowl game. I don't I don't think that they want the potential for that, losing to a Big 12 team you should have never left kind of conversation and embarrassment for the conference. I think they're throwing a lot of weight behind that. I also think that Houston would have a chance to beat Texas in that, if we're being completely honest. I don't think Texas is as great as people want to act like. I think that honestly, you'd have a bunch of Texas guys sitting at the bowl game for going pro or whatever reasons they want to set out the bowl game for. Houston guys would be super jazzed to get to play and beat Texas. And so I think they have a lot more guys signed up to play in it. I also think that the opt-outs make bowl games kind of hard to judge. But ultimately, like if Colin Simmons plays in that game, he's a great defensive lineman at UT Austin, Duncanville kid, top caliber guy. He's only a sophomore, so he can't go pro, and he's supposedly never going to transfer out of Texas. So I imagine he plays in the bowl game they play in. He would be hard for Houston to block. On the inverse, though, actually there's a lot of matchups Houston could win in that one with Koziol and Amare Thomas, but trying to get their shots at on tape against top caliber opponents to put on video for the NFL. I also think that you'd have, some luck up front defensively against the offensive front. I think Arch Manning will be running around a lot for his life. He can run, but I think he'd be running a lot for his life at different points. I don't think, though, that there's any shot Texas plays a Big 12 team in the Texas Bowl because they're going to fight to never have to do that. Now, that's all happens if one Big 12 team makes it in. If 2 Big 12 teams make it in, I think the Pop-Tarts Bowl is much more of a reality. I also would look at the Alamo Bowl because Utah has indicated, frankly, Arizona and Arizona State too, that they're going to follow their last couple years of their Pac-12 financial responsibilities to go to represent the bigger Pac-12 of sorts in bowl season games. So there are possibilities that Big 12 teams would be playing other Big 12 teams under that guise. Last year, you had Colorado play BYU because Colorado was representing the Pac-12, right? That's how that happens. The Big 12 has typically seen the Alamo Bowl, I should say, has typically seen the first Big 12 team not to make the playoff in it, right? So if BYU and Texas Tech both got into the playoff, then you could see Houston in that Alamo Bowl because Utah and Arizona would probably be doing Pac-12 things, so it would actually leave Houston there, right? The Alamo Bowl is fun. You'd probably put to play a Pac-12 school. I think you'd play a higher-ranked Pac-12 school, though, than Utah or Arizona. So I think you'd probably see more like a USC, although I guess you could see Utah. In that case, we could talk a lot of crap that JT Wistrell of Locked On Utes, so that's always fun. The Pop-Tarts Bowl is super new, but it's a Big 12 versus an ACC school, and it typically takes somewhere in this, next team up kind of thing from the Big 12. And so that's why I think it'd be interesting to see which one of those gets Houston out of these three. That would be against an ACC school if all things shake out like they're supposed to. And honestly, that might be the most challenging opponent of the bunch because you get a very hungry Miami team. Now, Miami's got a very talented roster, but they also have a bunch of guys that might sit this game out or the bowl game out, regardless if they don't make the playoff. A lot of guys sit out their bowl games just to make sure they don't have to get hurt before going out for the NFL draft. Like last year, Cam Ward played a half of their Pop-Tarts Bowl game because he wanted to make sure that he hit some benchmark of all-time passing yards and whatnot, right? And I think that would be an interesting game for Houston. I really, if Ruben Bain played, that'd be a really hard blocking assignment for Houston. But I weirdly think Georgia Tech, who's also a very talented ACC team, but is not going to make the playoffs, doesn't look like out of them. That would be an interesting one too, mostly in that that's a team that's been ranked for most of the year, but I think Houston actually favorably matches up with, and that'd be an interesting way to compare the conferences, frankly. And I think Houston compares well with Virginia and Duke, who are in the ACC title game. And I think if a couple of these future NFL guys in Miami sit out, Houston probably wins the Miami game. Like those things would all be interesting to see. Obviously, we'll be following it more. The college football rankings coming out on Tuesday night may give us some more insight to this. We'll probably hit more of this on Wednesday. And after the final playoff rankings come out, we'll know a lot more. The bowls will all be hitting right then. We'll hit it as soon as it goes live. All that and more each and every day here at Locked on Coogs. So hit subscribe and hit the bell so you know when we go live. Locked on Coogs is primarily Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team every day. Go Coogs.